Rachel here. Apologies for my low-tech way of doing things. Anyway, I just want to speak informally today about the hearing that I went to in the High Court in Wellington on Monday, starting the 9th of October through to the 11th. This was a hearing called a judicial review, and this was something that the Jehovah's Witnesses Australasia sought. So that was back in March, and I believe it is referred to as litigation. And so essentially what it was, the Jehovah's Witnesses were not happy at being included in the Royal Commission in New Zealand, and this commission was looking into abuse in care. Initially the commission started out, it was just going to look at abuse of children and vulnerable adults in the care of state institutions. But because there was a huge outcry from those who had been abused in the care of religious institutions, and many submissions were made to have the scope of the inquiry expanded to include faith-based institutions, then that's what happened. And it was further expansion of the terms of reference that made it very, very clear that, in fact, the government did want to scrutinise groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses who, although they don't have schools, orphanages and things like that, where children are actually separated and living away from their parents, or even as like in a day school where they're away from their parents for a number of hours every day, they wanted to examine abuse that took place in a pastoral care setting. So that brought the Jehovah's Witnesses into scope. So of course they didn't like that. I think their main objection, some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses have got the wrong idea and think that perhaps the inquiry is just beginning, but no, the inquiry has finished pretty much. They're not accepting any more information, any more submissions or anything about it. They've had millions and millions of documents to comb through, and who knows how many hundreds, thousands of claims from abuse survivors they've had to go through. But what the Jehovah's Witnesses are saying is that we should never have been included in the inquiry in the first instance. And what they're really afraid of is the Royal Commission making findings against them that won't be favourable, because the inquiry is at the point now where they are working on providing a draft report of their findings, which will go to the government, I believe in November, or fairly soon, and then the final report won't be made public until next year. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are fighting tooth and nail to avoid being named in that final report. They would rather not be mentioned at all in there. And I think they are concerned that the Commission will make findings on things that are not perhaps even related directly to abuse, like looking at perhaps their institutional response to child sexual abuse, which we know is very flawed and very inadequate. So they really don't want this to be in the public domain, because they fear that perhaps the government will make request further information from them and make demands on them to perhaps change their practices, which they're not happy about at all. So their argument against being included in the commission in the first place sort of boiled down to a couple of things. They said that it was unlawful for the commission to change the terms of reference by expanding the meaning of abuse and care. They argue that the wording of the original terms of reference precluded that from happening, that made it unlawful for them to add to or change. But as the Mr. Butler, who was speaking for the Attorney General at the hearing, stated that the inquiry the whole purpose of it is to go where the information leads. You know, the purpose of the inquiry that he pointed out was to determine the scope and the nature of abuse in care in New Zealand. And so they were going to leave no stone unturned. And the Commission, in fact, has the power to do that, because a Royal Commission is representing the public interest of people. And Mr. Butler, who was there speaking for the Attorney General during the hearing, and he spoke, you know, at least most of Tuesday, you know, he was defending the right of the Commission to expand the terms of reference to include pastoral care, and also defending the government against the challenge that had been made that the amendment order was actually invalid. So I'll get more onto that a bit later. So the first day of the hearing, the Jehovah's Witnesses lawyers spoke first, and they went through the expanded terms of reference, which they took objection to, and actually singled out numerous paragraphs that they felt weren't relevant and didn't apply, and went too far, basically. The thing is, the document that the lawyer was referring to was not publicly available at that point, so I'm not aware. I haven't read that. It was called Minute 29. When the Commission first expanded their terms of, well, it's not so much they expanded the terms of reference, they just clarified. They clarified what they were getting at, what they were intending, because the Jehovah's Witnesses had said, no, the scope doesn't include us. We don't know why you're even asking us to supply information. So the Commission would say, well, actually, yeah, it does include you. And then the Jehovah's Witnesses would get nitpicky and look at the exact wording of the terms of reference. And so the Royal Commission clarified the terms of reference in Minute 16, and then they clarified them further in Minute 29, just to make it absolutely clear and without a doubt to the Jehovah's Witnesses that they are included, that they fall within scope. So the Jehovah's Witness lawyers argued against this on technicalities. So they, like I mentioned earlier, they said that the original wording of the original terms of reference that were published did not allow for an expansion. I guess they feel it's not actually a clarification, but they think that the Royal Commission's Minute 16 actually went beyond what was laid out in the original terms of reference, and so the Commission was saying, no, we're just making it clear what we're after, what we mean. So that was the first part of the JW lawyers' argument, that basically the Commission had no right and it was unlawful for them to make clarifications. So the second part of the argument was that the amendment order was invalid. So the amendment order came about because that this is basically the government stepping in and validating what the Commission had said, that yes, the Commission is right, this is what we, the government, we want, this is what the inquiry is about, and we want to know about abuse in pastoral care. So again, the Jehovah's Witness lawyers argued on technicalities, saying that the amendment order wasn't actually made using the correct procedures, and the counsel for the government, essentially the Attorney General, said that yes, it is valid, and it all got quite technical, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really explain all the ins and outs of it, but they made a very good argument as to why the amendment order was valid. and it was pretty, well, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but it sounded pretty convincing to me. So basically, yeah, the Jehovah's Witness lawyers are really looking at technicalities of the law to try and make the addition of, well, not the addition, the clarification of pastoral care, make it that they were unlawful, or that the amendment order was invalid. So 2 lines there. On the other hand, Mr. Butler, who was speaking for the Attorney General, and he stated quite clearly before he started talking, because he was aware of us all sitting in the back in the public gallery listening, he made it clear that his position there was not to take the side of the Royal Commission necessarily, and he stated that his views are quite independent of the inquiry. He said his purpose in being there was to represent public interest, and he explained that the very nature of royal commissions is in the interests of the public. You know, what does the public want to know? What would they be interested in? What might affect them? So he explained that the very nature of a royal commission is inquisitory, that it's like turning over all the rocks, if you like, all the stones. And the intention, as he stated and restated, was that the government set up the commission to discover the nature and scope of, was it the scope he said? Maybe I'm not getting the exact terminology right, but you know, where and how abuse of young people, you know, children and vulnerable adults, where is it happening, and then finding out why it's happening. And he stressed that royal inquiries are not limited by statute, I suppose, that they are very flexible and they're allowed to go where the evidence leads. You know, there aren't limits on it, like you can't go here, which is what the Jehovah's Witnesses is trying to say. You can't look at us because of this law, this law, this law. And he was saying, no, that a royal commission can go anywhere and look where they need, you know, because they're trying to, that ultimately the end game of the commission is to find out where abuse is happening and why, and what can we do about it. It wasn't to single out the Jehovah's Witnesses and persecute them. And that actually did come up in the hearing, where the Jehovah's Witnesses felt that they were being discriminated against, that they were being singled out. You know, why aren't other religions being included? Why are you investigating us? And they actually had the nerve to mention arsons of Kingdom Halls as possibly being a result of a bad report on them in the media. So Mr. Butler, for the Attorney General, stressed that no, they're not being singled out. This inquiry invited abuse survivors of any religion in New Zealand to come to the Commission with their complaint. It wasn't only complaints from this church or that church. All church, any abuse was, people were allowed to come to the Commission and report their abuse. And what they found, that the Jehovah's Witnesses were among the top 8 religious institutions that they were most concerned about. And what concerned them wasn't just the number of complaints, but other factors as well. So for the Jehovah's Witnesses, they gathered information from around the world, from other reports that had been made about Jehovah's Witnesses, about their instances of abuse, their policies, practices, procedures and everything. So they actually had a ton of information about Jehovah's Witnesses, and adding that together with the number of complaints they had in New Zealand gave them great concern. So that's why Jehovah's Witnesses were among the top 8 of the different religious institutions that were investigated. He made an interesting point, actually. It was asked, he did mention that there were not many complaints from other faiths, non-Christian faiths in New Zealand. And he said that is possibly because the years that the commission was looking at was 1950 to 1999, and a lot of immigration to New Zealand has happened after that point. So those other religious communities weren't very large or very strong in New Zealand. So that might be a reason why there weren't complaints brought to the commission from people from those faiths. So it was largely Christian, for the most part, Christian faiths that had complaints against them. So I kind of think that sums it up, really. I mean, there were lots of interesting remarks that the judge made during the hearing, and it was put to the Jehovah's Witness lawyers scenarios like, what if you do win this case, if the judge does decide in their favour, then what effect would that have on the whole commission and survivors from other faith-based religions who were abused in pastoral care? Because what the Jehovah's Witnesses are saying is they're not saying that they want to be exempt from the inquiry altogether. They just want the terms of reference to basically exclude them. If it doesn't include pastoral care, then they will be out of scope. So that would mean that the commission, even though it has all this information on them, won't be able to publish it in their report. And so that will happen with other institutions too, like the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, who is in a similar position to the Jehovah's Witnesses. So the lawyers for the Jehovah's Witnesses were asked point blank, at least a couple of times, what effect would it have on other faith-based institutions and their survivors? And they said they didn't think it would affect them. And there was a remark that the judge made, and she said, "Oh, it's all about you." That does kind of sum it up, doesn't it? Because I am sure with this litigation, the Jehovah's Witnesses are primarily thinking of their reputation. They're not thinking about the work of the commission, because as Mr. Butler brought out, that if we allow challenges to royal commissions like this to succeed, then it threatens the effectiveness of future royal commissions. If anyone can just challenge things that the commission is doing, then the work of the commission, is hamstrung, for want of a better word. And he did say that the point of a royal commission is really to be free of all these legalities. I don't know if that's the right word to use. It should be did he say? Judiciary. It shouldn't be. Yeah, not tied up with, all these different laws and things saying you can't do this, you can't do that. It's supposed to be pretty free to investigate anything. I mean, it's the government sets it up, and surely they have the authority to say what they want doing in the country and how they want it done. And this is what the Jehovah's Witnesses is essentially challenging. It's like, I did put it this way with an illustration that has been used with Watchtower in the past, about the tail wagging the dog. It was like the Jehovah's Witnesses are the tail and the dog is the government, and they are trying to wag the government, which isn't right, is it? The tail needs to follow the dog, so the Jehovah's Witnesses need to toe the line and do what the government, they need to be obedient to the superior authorities. So, yeah, it was all very, very interesting. Bit of a steep learning curve for me. So we have to wait for the judge's decision. She's got mountains of stuff to read through, the submissions from both sides. We also had someone representing, or someone from Crown Law, so like the government again, and he was going through in a bit of detail about the amendment order that was made and the challenge that it was invalid, and he was trying to show and prove that it wasn't invalid. The way it was done was perfectly orthodox and just fine. So I'll take him at his word. So all in all, after listening to everything, I felt that it seemed like the Jehovah's Witnesses really don't have a leg to stand on. And the judge was kind of a bit baffled as to why they were even pursuing this course. They were pursuing litigation even before any findings had been made or published about them. So she did put it as the cart before the horse. You know, why are you doing this? And at the same time, she criticised them for leaving this judicial review to the very last hour. In fact, not really the last hour, more like the last minute. They've known, like, that when these terms of reference were expanded to include pastoral care, they could have done something then. They could have sought a judicial review at that point, but they've waited till right the last minute, just when the Commission's investigations, everything have concluded, and they're about to write their report. So you could sense a great deal of irritation from the judge regarding that. And it puts her under tremendous pressure to make a decision. She only had 2 weeks, tops really, to come up with her decision. Although the Jehovah's Witness, she did say that the Commission did say that they could delay their findings on the Jehovah's Witnesses for, maybe up to a month maybe. So, but she's still under a lot of pressure, and you could tell she was a bit pissed off about that, really. So, well, she didn't say that, but yeah, you can imagine she would be. So as far as the hearing itself, so it went for 3 full days. There was media leading up to it in the news here online, and quite a lot of, I think it was 6 or 7 articles in the media, or maybe not quite that many, but quite a few. So it was like fairly high profile here in New Zealand. And the courtroom that it started off in on the Monday turned out to be a bit small because they had to bring in extra chairs for the public gallery. They're pretty small anyway. There was only about seating for about 40 people, I think, and that filled up, and then they had some extra chairs. So they decided to move it to a larger courtroom for the remainder, which I think seated like 45, 50 people, and that was certainly full on Tuesday. But numbers were down a little bit on the Wednesday because they weren't expecting to go into Wednesday, so I guess people hadn't arranged to have time off work for that. So there was an interesting mix of people in the public gallery. There were obviously Jehovah's Witnesses, and we think that there were roughly around about 12, including an elder that I am familiar with in my region, because I live in the Wellington region, and I don't know whether he recognised me. He should have done, because he visited me in hospital when I was sick, but that was 20 years ago. And then 10 years ago, he revoked my invitation at the convention and escorted me out. And then he did seem to go into panic mode when he saw me turn up to a JW funeral a few years ago. So I don't know whether he recognised me at the hearing, But there were other faces there that I recognised, but I didn't know their names, but they're long-time Jehovah's Witnesses. So on the other side, there was one survivor that had made her complaint to the commission. She was there, being supported by someone from the commission, because it's pretty tough coming to something like this, and there are Jehovah's Witnesses there. And we had two people who were abuse survivors, but in the UK and in Australia, and they came as well. And there were a number of legal professionals there as well, taking notes. I spoke to one of them, and she had a particular interest in a certain aspect of the law that was involved in the hearing, so she was taking notes. And I sat next to a German law student who was visiting New Zealand on holiday and wanted to attend a few hearings just to see what the New Zealand judicial system was like, because she said it's actually very different. And so she was there on the Monday morning. She wasn't going to come to any more, but at lunchtime she said it was very interesting, so she's coming back. And then she came back on the Tuesday for the whole day as well. And then Wednesday she had other plans, so she couldn't come. But she gave me her email address to send her any information and updates. So she'll take those back to Germany. And, the more you tell people, the better it gets out there. So that was interesting. So, and it was on Tuesday that TV3 reporters showed up, and we had a reporter from RNZ there as well. So Lara Kaput, who flew over from Australia for the Tuesday and Wednesday, she was interviewed by the reporter and appeared on our news on TV in New Zealand with a brief comment. And Luke Hollis, he lives in Wellington, but he is an abuse survivor from the UK. He gave a comment as well. And also Shane Meechan, who used to be in my congregation here and is now an advocate for survivors of abuse and does other activist work. So he was interviewed on TV3 and also on radio. Yeah. So there's been quite a bit of media interest and coverage. And in fact, when I was speaking to the German law student, she's doing her PhD, it was only because she saw it mentioned in the news online on the Monday morning that this case was, this judicial review was in the High Court that day. That's when she thought, oh, that sounds interesting, and came along. So she hadn't planned it or anything. She just happened to see it in the news. So yay, news. So that was very interesting. Something else interesting that happened during the course of Wednesday was that the witnesses were quite friendly to us. It's kind of a bit weird. Some might be very cynical about that, but in one of the breaks, one of the Jehovah's Witnesses actually approached one of our group who is a survivor and just engaged in polite, friendly chit-chat with her. He had known her from the past and just started chatting. And then another one of the JW's sisters, and it might possibly have been the wife of the elder, she was sitting next to him, so I suppose that's who it was, in the ladies' restroom was all chit-chatty with us, talking about, oh, it's so warm in there, isn't it? And oh, you need to drink lots of water, and just that kind of just chatter about normal stuff, but quite friendly. I thought, oh, this is interesting. And then at the conclusion of Wednesday, and we were all kind of tired because it had gone on longer than had been expected, and we all had like sore bottoms, and So at the end, I thought, I'm going to talk to these witnesses and see what kind of reaction I get. Because they must know that I'm an apostate. So I just got up when we were all picking up our belongings and said, oh, wow, I think we all did really, really well, didn't we? You know, sitting through 3 days of this. Oh, more than happy to talk to me, you know. Oh, yes, I didn't talk about the proceedings at all. I just kept it to other stuff like, oh, you know, how's your bottom? Oh, that's sitting. I was wriggling around, and they were friendly as pie. So it was kind of a bit weird, especially after the night before on TV3 on the news. Some in the articles there had been some perhaps harsh comments made that would have made the Jehovah's Witnesses a bit angry. Yet they were quite friendly to us on the Wednesday. So it remains to be seen what happens there. And I choose not to be cynical and think that it was some kind of like plot or scheme to make themselves look good in the eyes of the court. Because when they were chatting to us, it wasn't they didn't have an audience, so like in the ladies' restroom, there was no one there to look at that witness and thinking, oh, they're normal, they don't shun people. So, and it was acknowledged by the court, actually, at the very, very end. The people in the public gallery were thanked for their attentiveness and obviously not making any dramas. And they did acknowledge that they recognised there were people at the back that weren't all on the same boat. So they knew that. Yet they wouldn't have seen any animosity or anything going on. So I'm hoping the Jehovah's Witnesses look at us there and our behaviour and think, they don't look like the angry, horrible, foaming at the mouth apostates that the governing body try to depict apostates as. And in fact, I was kind of a bit surprised that even Jehovah's Witnesses were allowed to come, because they will be exposed to things perhaps that they'd never heard about. Procedures, policies, cases of abuse. I mean, none of that was gone into at all. No, like they didn't discuss actual abuse survivors' complaints. That would be wrong to do that. So they didn't go into descriptions of, I think things, that those were available to the judge, but they weren't read to the courtroom. They were there for her to read. So I'm wondering if, what I'm hoping is that some of those Jehovah's Witnesses present will go away and think, this Royal Commission isn't out to get us. It hasn't singled us out. It's just trying to find out why children and vulnerable adults have been abused, and what can we do to make it better so this doesn't happen. So I'm hoping that for some of them it just changes their perspective, because they are thinking, they're conditioned by the governing body to think that the governments are out to get them, out to destroy their faith, spread lies about them and that sort of thing. So I'm really hoping that some of these more thoughtful Jehovah's Witnesses will just rethink things. But I don't know, we'll see. But you know, it certainly was very interesting to me how friendly they were with us on the Wednesday. Now let me think if there's anything else I need to add. I don't think so. I mean, it all got very technical, obviously, and you know, but I think I've given you the gist of things. And I mean, my feeling is that I can't see how the Jehovah's Witnesses will get what they want. It's just against the whole. It's against what it's like telling the government, like so the clarification It's like the Jehovah's Witnesses were telling the government, you don't want to know this. And the government says, oh, yeah, we do want to know that. And they're saying, you're not allowed to want to know that. I mean, that's really exactly what it came down to. So I don't think they're going to get away with telling the government what to do. So when you look at all the factors considered, I don't think they're going to come away with a favourable decision from the judge. So we'll see what steps they take next. But to me, that would just be like reputation suicide if they do that. Yeah, it'd be kind of pointless. And as the judge kind of said several times throughout the hearing, that, you know, if you say you don't have any abuse in care, then let the final report establish that, you show the public that you don't, and you'll come off with it looking good. So why don't you just let it follow its course? Yeah, good question. I think something else I haven't mentioned so far that was discussed a lot by the JW lawyers. I mean, I've told you that they didn't agree with the expanded or clarified terms of reference, but they actually honed in a lot on what the word care means, what in care means, and what assumed responsibility for care means. So they kind of dissected everything and looked at everything. And I really don't think the judge was very convinced. And some of the arguments relating to care, pastoral care, were actually deceptive. Like the lawyer, she did say that the Jehovah's Witnesses do not have the policy or the practice of putting children in the care of elders, like a child in the care of an elder on his own where abuse could happen. So policy or practice, which clearly is not the case, because we know it's a very common practice to put your child in the care of an elder. I did, because I was, my husband was a non-believer. I had a son in his mid-teens. I felt he needed mentoring. He was a fatherless child as far as the truth goes. And I asked this elder to mentor my son. He came round to see him. They were alone in a room. He went out alone with him in his car for field service. And what upset my son and surprised me a little bit is that this brother allowed my son to drive his car, or offered to let him drive his car, even though my son didn't have his learner's license. So that would have been illegal. And what business would he have doing that with my son out in the field service, you know, like return visits and stuff. So this is pretty common, that elders are asked to, you know, mentor fatherless boys particularly. So there, yeah, so, but I don't think the wool was pulled over the eyes of the Commission at all. So we'll just have to wait. So about 2 weeks' time, roughly, we should get a decision. Anyway, I think I've rambled on for a long time, and I hope you understood what I've said. Took me a few days to kind of distill it in my own head. There's just so much happening and so much said, you know, and so much went over my head. But I think I've got the main points there. So I will end this now and turn my video off in the old-fashioned way. Bye.